Hey, I just received this post from Italy from Mimo Perufo, Aquila Strings, and Mimo has experience with some new materials, some new constructions, and he has made a replica of the Kaplan golden spirals, and I'm very curious to try these. So here we are for the presentation of the Aquila Gold Springs synthetic G and D plus the A and E Series 22 basses. So the story behind this is that Mimo Perufo, the head of Aquila Strings, realized that many bass players miss the legendary Kaplan golden spirals. These were strings that have been used by legendary bassists like Charles Mingus, Charlie Hayden, and maybe also Scott LaFaro. So Mimo took up the challenge and decided to make a replica of these golden spirals. And since Mimo also develops synthetic materials for all of his strings, he decided to also go for a synthetic version of the golden spirals replica. So here's the result. These are the Aquila Gold Springs synthetic G and D bass strings. So the core is made of one wire of a quite rigid material actually, and it is wrapped with a flat synthetic wire. The material for the core is a bioplastic which was blended with synthetic rubber. The strings that I used for this test have 20% of synthetic rubber in them. Now Mimo changed the recipe a little bit, and the strings that are being commercialized have 30% of synthetic rubber. Actually, a couple of testers, including me, recommended this to Mimo. After doing this test, I received the 30% rubber, and I would say the high frequencies are just a little bit smoother, which made the strings sound closer to gut strings. But I have to say that the difference is really small, so what you are going to hear in this test is very, very close to the model that's being commercialized. The sound will be even a little closer to a real gut sound. Mimo also developed low strings to match the G and D Gold Springs synthetic. The recommended match are the Series 22 A and E strings. Now these strings are made of totally different materials than the G and D. The core is a multi-filament synthetic core, so it's not just one wire. It's like hundreds or thousands of very thin filaments, thinner than hair. And this core is wound with 2 layers of copper wire, the outer layer being a flat wire. So I guess you are all curious to hear what these strings sound like. You will hear the sound examples in a few seconds. You can also hear these strings played by myself on a little jam session I did with guitar player Lars Bernsmann. I have put 3 tunes that we jammed together on my personal channel, and I will put the link in the description of this video if you want to listen to that. But for now, let's listen to the set with a couple of examples. So I will tell you my impressions now about these strings. But first of all, after I posted these videos of the duo jam session with Lars Bernsmann, I got many questions. One of the first questions was, can you play these strings with the bow? I have to say that especially the upper strings are very difficult to bow. You often have this phenomenon that the bow will just glide on the string and won't produce a sound. It's on the low string, it's not that much of a problem. This works. I mean, you don't have a very big range of dynamic possibilities, but still, they are definitely easier to bow than the upper strings. So that was question number one. The next question was, what do these strings feel like? I guess the question was meant in terms of tension and so on. Well, the tension is somewhere between what you could call a typical gut type of tension and something like synthetic core strings like Evaporazzi light, for instance. So it's somewhere in between. They feel softer than Evaporazzi light, but a little stiffer than plain gut. I would say that the lower strings have a little more tension than the upper strings, but it feels very balanced. So another question that often comes is, do these strings roll under the fingers? Well, due to the construction, the upper two strings, the G and the D, don't roll, but the lower strings do roll. I will show you this in the camera. So if I go, I try to show you like this. If I go like this, the G string nearly doesn't roll, the D string doesn't roll at all, and the A string, you will see how it rolls on my finger if I move like this, and the E string also a little bit less than the A string. Concerning the sound, well, my first impression was that these strings sound quite bright. I would say they sound bright, punchy, and airy. In fact, the basic question is, what benefit do we have if we wrap a synthetic wire around a gut core or a gut-like core? Well, I would say this winding, this wrapping brings a kind of an edge to the sound. The sound is a little bit more edgy. The sound has a little bit more presence or definition in the high frequencies. And it also adds some sustain to the sound. Of course, a synthetic winding always brings some kind of a plastic component to the sound. I mean, a plastic wrapping obviously sounds very different than a metal wrapping. The surface of the strings feels nice. It is not as smooth as strings like Spirocore, so you will hear a little noise when you are sliding. But a positive thing is also that the strings don't make your fingers dirty, even though the low strings have a copper winding. One more question was, how is the transition between the A and the D string? I will let you hear this. I would say that the white strings, the upper strings, have a tiny little bit more punch than the lower strings. But maybe this is just a subjective thing. Since the low strings are rolling on the fingers, they have a little less grip. So this gives the impression that you can't dig in that much. But when I hear them, I think both the low strings and the high strings have a really nice punch. To close up, I will play a little phrase on my Rubner with the Gold Springs synthetic, and then play the same phrase on my other basses to let you have a little comparison. So here's my Rubner with the Aquila strings. And let's now listen to my Höfner bass, which has the set of strings that I like to play most in the last couple of years. And let's listen just for fun to the third bass that I have here, which is my Hungarian 7/8. So as you could probably hear, the sound of the Aquilas has a lot more high frequencies. Some people would say the other basses with the other strings sounds like if there was a blanket over the sound. Well, it's just a matter of taste. I'm perfectly fine with strings that sound darker, but I must say that I really had fun playing these strings with a more open sound too. One more thing came to my mind when I was testing these strings. One of the questions that I received a lot in the last 1 or 2 years was, since Velvet Strings doesn't produce strings anymore, what I could recommend to replace, for instance, Velvet Garbo strings. Well, these strings don't really sound like the Velvet Garbo, but they definitely have some similarities. The Velvet Garbos also have this kind of an open, airy, natural sound. The Velvet Garbo also have this thing that they sound somewhere midway between a gut concept or a punchy sound, but also a sound with some sustain. So these strings definitely have some sustain. Also, in terms of tension, the tension is similar to the tension of Velvet Garbo strings. It's just that the sound, the timbre itself, is a little bit different, but has some similarities. So for all of you who are looking for a replacement for Velvet Garbo, this is an option to consider. So that was it for today. I hope you liked this presentation. If you did, please give me a like, please subscribe to my channel. And if you want, I would be very grateful for some tips. You can send me a little tip through PayPal or through Ko-fi. Thank you very much for that. I'm going to close up by playing a solo tune for you. This time it's going to be Doxy. Once again, thanks for watching and see you very soon. Bye-bye.